Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining our Parent Academy session on building resilience. My name is Holly Boakey, and I'm the Parent and Community Partnership Coordinator for the Clover Park School District. Our guest speaker tonight is Monique Gilmore, a nationally certified school psychologist who's worked in the field of education for 21 years, serving students age preschool all the way through high school. So our topic tonight is building resilience. This is such an important topic because our families and our students have endured so much change in this past year since we're all still recovering from the global COVID pandemic. We're still trying to find our way back to normal, whatever that may look like. Monique's presentation will give us tips on how to do that in healthy ways. Here's Monique.
We want to also consider that during COVID, there has been a financial strain on many families. And of course, parents always try their best, right, to give their child their very best selves and try to hide the level of strain that folks are under. But there have, there's been some businesses that have went under, some family-owned businesses. There has been, for some folks, it's been stressful going to work, with the virus, and other folks are just kind of waiting for when they can. So it was a lot to adjust to. We really want to talk about how we can help our kids now that we're kind of adjusting to that new normal, what it is now, and as we go forward. And that way, if there are any additional changes that happen, we're prepared. So, all right. So we are going to nerd out just for a little bit. I won't stay here too long talking about the brain, but I am a school psychologist. And I do have evidence-based practices, and I have kind of a cognitive behavioral model. And the reason I choose this model is because it's shown the best evidence for individual change compared to the other models. So basically, if the research and evidence shows me consistently that something works, I like to give it a go, right? So let's talk about the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is the part of your brain that's right here, kind of at the forehead. And I think of it as the problem solver. So almost as if it's there's a character, right? So this is how I and my kids remember things. So hopefully this is helpful for you. I think of it as the problem solver. So your prefrontal cortex carefully considers behavioral outcomes. So it thinks about, if I do this, what do I think is going to happen, right? What is the likely outcome? If I slap my brother to get the toy, I might get the toy faster, but I'm going to get in trouble. So I should not do that, right? So that's your prefrontal cortex, right? Talking. And so it uses different parts of the brain and it gets it to work all together. So for example, memory and language. So my prefrontal cortex is working really well right now because I'm able to talk and share, and I'm also able to remember all this information. So big thank you to my prefrontal cortex, right? And so it kind of coordinates all those different areas. And so if your prefrontal cortex was a character, it might say something like, okay, we all have to work together if we want to make a plan to solve this thing. All right. And so now we're going to talk about the amygdala. The amygdala is at the base of your brain, right back here. And I think of it as the alarmist. And the reason I think of that, the amygdala like that, is it releases stress hormone in response to threat. So now this can be a perceived threat, or it could be something that's an actual threat. And so it's in charge of that fight or flight, or some people like to call it fight, flight, or freeze. So your amygdala only thinks about right now. So your amygdala, in the situation we talked earlier about the toy, it's your child's amygdala might be saying, let's, we want this toy right now. Let's just do it, right? So it, and the tricky thing about that amygdala is it sends stress hormone that can freeze up your prefrontal cortex and give you kind of fuzzy brain. So the amygdala, if it's firing off too much, it can result in rage or extreme anxiety behaviors. So sometimes, a temper tantrum in younger kids would be an example of that, but you can also see that in older kids and adults. If you see someone who's yelling out their window at traffic, their amygdala is probably firing away. And also extreme anxiety behaviors. So in a teenager, that might look like an anxiety attack, right? Or an adult, it might look like an anxiety attack. That's when your amygdala pretty much has taken the floor, right? So if your amygdala could talk, it might say, this is a full-blown emergency, no time to think, right? So when you're like with your kids, why did you do that? Like, what could you have been thinking? Well, they were thinking with their amygdala, and they weren't giving their prefrontal cortex time to process, right? So resilient people have learned to train their prefrontal cortex to take the wheel, even when the amygdala insists it knows the way. So people who are resilient to change, they have some stress because it's new routines, new changes. But if something new comes along, and even if that new thing is a little stressful, they're able to take the time to get their prefrontal cortex processing so it can plan and work together with the other sides of the brain and really consider the situation to make the best response. So I guess a good way of saying that might be responding instead of reacting, right? That's what our prefrontal cortex helps us do. And resilient people they've got this down pat, but this is something that can be trained in individuals, that can be taught and learned. So let's talk about teaching replacement behaviors and coping strategies. So a replacement behavior is a skill that meets the need of the problem behavior. So for example, if I'm going to use my words to ask, if it's a young child and they use their words to ask for the toy and they get the toy, well, that meets the same need as the problem behavior of physical aggression, okay? So when you're thinking about behaviors, each student's problem behaviors or child's problem behaviors are maintained by something that the student is trying to get or avoid, okay? So let's talk about some school examples. This would be taking a break instead of running away from class. This allows the child to escape a difficult task, right? So another example would be raising your hand instead of blurting out to get attention, because both of them get you the attention from the teacher. At home, we already talked about that example of using our words instead of hitting. An adult example, just to help you kind of relate to it, would be having a cup of coffee instead of taking a nap to feel more alert, okay? So I want to share, and this is really important because I think there's a lot of folks that attempt this, but there's a key component I want to make sure that you know about teaching these coping behaviors and replacement behaviors. There is a lot of benefit of teaching replacement behaviors when the student or child is calm, okay? So if you could think of a time when you had to learn something while you were really upset, it is much harder to learn something if you're stressed out than it is when you're calm, right? And as we talked a little bit about this before, so your stress hormone from your amygdala, it releases that stress hormone into that prefrontal cortex, right? And it gives you what I like to call to the younger kids, fuzzy brain, which in a psychological term would be inhibits the prefrontal cortex. So teaching a student a new behavior when they're already upset, it's not going to work because their brain is not ready for that learning. So I have seen so many wonderful adults do this, and I used to teach, and I remember doing this once or twice myself. So it's good to be patient with yourself because it is common for adults when there is a problem behavior for the adult to try to use that opportunity to teach the new behavior, the replacement behavior that we want. The challenge with that is, right, we've got that prefrontal cortex getting all fuzzy from our amygdala. So they're not in a place, their brain is not going to be receptive to that learning, right? So really, you want to teach this when they're calm and teach it, use a lot of repetition and predictability with it. So a little bit more information about this. Use of visuals is often great for teaching replacement behaviors. We're going to talk more about that too. The great thing about replacement behaviors is that if your child can meet his or her needs through replacement behavior, he or she will be less likely to demonstrate the problem behavior. So remember, coffee instead of napping. And one of the reasons I really love this approach is because teaching coping strategies actually helps rewire the brain. And proof of it is in MRI imaging. So you can actually see the new neural connections that result from teaching new coping behaviors. So the way that I kind of like to describe it, your brain has different neural pathways, okay? And I like to think of it for a metaphor kind of like a river. So if you have a neural pathway that is a habit, that means that riverbed is pretty deep, right? There's been a lot of water that's gone down that river. And when we're building a replacement behavior or coping behavior, we are diverting that river, right? So we're diverting it so that the river flows a different way. Now there's going to have to be a lot of water that's ran down the diverted river we created before that riverbed is deeper than the habit river that was already there, which means back to what we were talking about, repetition, 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 okay? So this is an exercise. Throughout this presentation, I'm going to be talking about different ways to apply this to your life. And I think that this is something that you can, if you choose, start right now, or you can also watch this video is being recorded. So you can watch it again and go, okay, you know, what were those things she asked me? And that's okay too. You know, I want you to really be able to process it. So I want you to think of a simple replacement behavior that you do that meets the need of a behavior you would like to avoid. Okay, I'm going to give some examples. Make a to-do list instead of avoiding a big project. That helps you escape being overwhelmed, right? Another one that I do is going on a run instead of being fidgety and restless at work. I am someone who loves movement, so I need to fit it in. Another adult example might be putting in your earbuds and playing music instead of asking your work neighbor to stop talking so you can get some work done, right? So kind of avoiding that whole conversation, because putting your earbuds in is the universal sign is, okay, I need to really get this work done. So those are some examples of different adult behaviors. So if you want to take a moment just to kind of think about that, what yours might be. If you'd like, you can put it, you are welcome to share that in the chat. If you have any questions at all, please do make sure that you let Holly know, okay? All right. So teaching replacement behaviors. And so now we're going to be talking about a specific replacement behavior, taking a break. Even for adults, it's something that seems so simple, but can be so hard. So when teaching replacement behaviors, we are specifically trying to teach taking a break. It's really great to set aside a break space in your house that is just for your kid. So practicing taking a break can be really reinforcing, especially if you do it when they're calm and they practice it, right? And you reinforce them with specific praise. And if you want extra bang for your buck, you can always do like a tasty snack right afterwards or something, so they have that mental association. And I think having visuals during a break, so that when they practice, it can be really helpful, kind of like, what are the things I'm supposed to do in this space? So we're gonna keep going down here. I think having a let's take a break script is very helpful for adults. And it's great if multiple adults kind of agree on what that is. Again, it seems so simple, and yet I've seen parents and teachers and paraprofessionals sometimes struggle with this. And the reason it's so important that it's done in the same way is that's increasing that predictability, right? So it's really helpful to say it in the exact same words. Avoid moralizing or giving the child any more attention if you are going to have them do this after a problem behavior, because you can practice, but after a problem behavior, sometimes you're like, wow, we really need a break, right? So I would just, if they've done a problem behavior, like hit their brother and they're put in a break space, you said, let's take a break. We go to our break space. We've been practicing. You just want to be careful not to give too much attention to them at that time, because attention itself is reinforcing, especially for little ones. But in reality, adults, everybody's pretty reinforced by attention. So I think also using a timer can get a child used to the routine, because again, that's the sameness. Like we have our 5-minute break, right? This is what we're going to do for 5 minutes. So, and it's just a visual for them to kind of know, okay, how long am I going to be in this break space? It helps, because keeping track of time for kids is actually super hard. And when you're upset, like if you are to use this instead of, or if there's a problem behavior and you are to use this, it can be, if you're upset, it's hard to remember how long you've been there. Time is difficult to manage in that. I would say ideally, right, you'd want your child to take a break before they did a problem behavior. So it's right when they start to feel really anxious or really angry, going, okay, I need to take a break. And if they're able to do that, you are doing fantastic, and reinforce that kiddo. It's time for, I don't know, some sort of tasty snack afterwards because they caught themselves and went into that. And so the more routine, the more this kids like get used to this just being what they do, the more you'll see them just readily apply it. I've seen students actually who will just go to their break space before, they're not mad. They want to be there for a little bit. They just want to be calm and kind of separate from everyone for a little bit. And that can actually help with anxiety as well. So depending on your style and comfort level, you could even teach your child balloon belly breaths. And so it's a trick because you're basically making yourself feel calmer in your body and mind by through these deep breaths. Okay. So again, I talk about, something reinforcing after we practice deep breaths, if this is something you want to teach your child to do. And yeah, it physiologically causes the body to trick the brain into a calmer state. You'll actually see this with medical professionals. If someone has an anxiety attack, like they will specifically use this because it's something that's medically derived, okay? And I like these visuals. I like visuals for belly breaths because I remember when I was younger, and even as a young adult, people would tell me, just breathe. I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm breathing right now. That's how I'm alive. And so really teaching kids what we mean when we're talking about those deep breaths, which is belly breaths. So as you can see in this picture, and I'm going to kind of show you as well, belly breaths are when you put your hand right here and you fill the balloon and you let it out. You see how the hands go out? If you're a little kid, that's very helpful. And can I tell you what? Even in graduate school, that's how our professors taught us to ensure we understood. Okay, so I'm gonna do it one more time. Belly breaths, you put your hands on your stomach and you're breathing deep in your stomach, not your chest. So you should see the hands go up and down, okay? And that'll teach your kid how to do that. And I mean, my kids do 5 to 10. 10 is for full effect. So this is also a lot of these things I'm going to be talking about that really fit into elementary, also preschool, right? Because I do the whole range, but this also works for older kids and adults because older kids and adults need a break too. And so having a place where a teen can go to feel calmer when stressful situations occur can help immensely. Also, there's different activities you could do if you wanted to do journaling at that time. This is a great replacement behavior because writing down information will get your prefrontal cortex to take over because language is one of those things the prefrontal cortex does. So if your kids needs to take a break, journaling can really help bring that, bring kind of the prefrontal cortex to the wheel, right? For stress. And mini breaks are also great, going on a walk, listening to music, stretching, 10 deep breaths for kids and adults. Sometimes it feels like they don't have time, or adults, we feel like we don't have time, but just 10 deep breaths will actually make you substantially calmer. And most people have time for 10 deep breaths at some time of the day, right? And if that's where you're at with your breaks, start small. So I'm also going to talk a little bit about anxiety and taking a break because I think it's important, especially for kiddos, for all kiddos, regardless of if you are developmentally functioning within the range of your peers, or if you have a disability. It's really great to learn to take a break. It's great for kids, it's great for teens, it's great for tweens, it's great for adults. But specifically with anxiety, deep breathing practice is very important because it will help prevent anxiety attacks, and it will help you during amidst anxiety attacks. Okay. So it's also good to know, kind of as an adult, or, even, with your child, working with your child, that if someone's very agitated and trying to take a mental break, limit talking. So, I mean, if you have the practice of taking a break and you have your script for that, I would just use that to say, maybe we need to take a break. And having them do that, I think, is really is a great thing to help them in the moment. Sometimes what adults don't realize is if we talk too much, it's actually very stressful if you have a lot of stress hormone in your brain. So movement is also really important to reduce anxiety. So movement breaks can help prevent anxiety. I have some kids I've worked with where they go to their break space and they literally hop up and down. I've even had some of my kids, okay, like I can tell you have a lot of energy. It looks like you need a movement break. Let's go ahead and run around. But movement can be very helpful too if you're having intense anxiety as a child, a teen, an adult. Another thing that is really helpful is if there's extreme anxiety, having a visual script for something that reminds them that this is anxiety and it's just a feeling, it will pass. And that's actually a coping thought. We're going to talk a little bit about those visuals, right? Because if you're saying it verbally to someone, it can be a kind of a lot. But if they have their visual, that they remind themselves of that, and they can remind themselves again if they're having an extreme anxiety reaction, that can be really helpful. That particular script is something that teens will often use that I work with. Okay, so bear with me here. We are actually going to take a moment to do 10 deep breaths from our stomach. And the reason we're going to do that is because maybe you won't have any other time to do it but today, and I just want you to get in the practice if you can, so you can teach it to your kids. So remember, if you're a good way to learn how to do it, if this is the first time that you're kind of enacting this practice, is you're going to put your hands in your stomach and you're going to fill that balloon. It's going to go out and then it's going to go back in, right? So like, let's do 10 right now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right. So that's a great skill to learn. It can help before stressful events, before a big meeting. Just those little things. So I hope you all are feeling a little bit the physiological benefits of that. So in terms of deep breaths and something called progressive relaxation, where you get different parts of your body to progressively relax, websites and audiobooks are very helpful for practice. And I would look at something that provides that narration, because TV can be kind of all absorbing, but if you have something where you just have that narration going on, a kid, teen, etc., can kind of use that, or adult can use that to do deep breaths. I will say, if you learn how to do the deep breaths, most kids will, and you practice it in front of your kid, most kids will love to practice that with you because they want to be around you. You know, kids, they mostly want you, your attention all the time. That's something, if you start to do this practice with the deep breaths, it can be neat to do it with your kids, just to kind of get them going on it, especially for the younger kids. You know, when they're teens and adolescents, we're not quite as cool anymore, but so they're very interested in being cool at the age, and, parents aren't cool. So what's great is there's a lot of celebrities and sports heroes that practice this. And so kind of making that mental association with them can be great. And we talked about visuals, right? I just have to keep hitting it up because during practice, you might be like, why do we need this thing? But when there is extreme anxiety or someone's really upset, it's really helpful to have that. Kind of like your cheat sheet. Okay. So why am I just yabbering for days about taking a break? And the way to do it? Well, it can, learning how to recalibrate and take a moment, take a break can improve your work performance for adults, classwork for kids, your interpersonal relationship, your relationships with peers, your problem-solving skills, always good to have on board, your creativity and idea generation, your satisfaction with self and others, and learning new information. So the reason I bring this up is because, there's lots of different ideas about what works for kids. Well, the evidence shows that taking a break and doing this deep breathing and relaxation really does make a difference. So, and the research is there to show all these great areas. So it's really worth, taking a moment if you are interested. I do also want to share a common way that people take a break that isn't as helpful long-term, and especially with kids. So screen time is something, like I said, a lot of people use to neutralize their feelings. I sometimes will put on a movie, if I'm just like, I need to not think for a little bit. And this is something that can be a treat. What you have to be careful that it's not the main course, right? Or you're not using this as a replacement behavior. And the reason for that is that even though, and I see this a lot with my boys, video games are very adept. Like video games are kind of experts at thought stopping, kind of stopping your brain so you're not feeling that stress. But it can have really negative consequences. So if you're doing video games or TV where there's conflict, violence, aggression, and I mean, that's the whole drama of television, right? And the whole drama of video games. It's important to know that screen time can actually activate your amygdala. So instead of getting it to calm down and get all those benefits, it kind of gets it firing. And so this can normalize violence in the long term. And it can actually, in the long term, especially with aggressive or where there's a lot of violence going on in video games, it can actually increase the likelihood so that the kid is more aggressive. In other words, it can make a kid more aggressive if they have prolonged exposure to those violent video games. Like I said, every family has the right to decide how they want to use that. But if you're trying to teach a break, I would not use TV or video games as a replacement behavior. Okay. So we're going to do another one of those apply it to your life exercises. So at home, or if you're watching this on video later, do you have a way that you can take a break during a busy day. Because this is all great in theory, but is there any time during your day that you can take a break? Maybe it's just a mini break. Do you have a mini break or longer to feel calm and gather yourself at some part of the day? And then I would also, just for a reflection question, does your child regularly practice taking a break? Like, is that something that they've done in their routines? And do you have this scheduled? One of the things that I've actually seen different, very resilient adults do is they will schedule in, for example, their lunch break. And so there'll be all these calendar events, but they're like, you know what? I am going to put an appointment for this lunch break or an alarm on my phone because I want to have, if I don't do that, like I will just keep working, going. And it's kind of the same with kids, right? So like having a specific time where they can practice, or if you guys want to practice together, can be really cool. Really good for kids. So if you are watching this right now, it might be time to take a 5-minute mini break. So I'm going to go ahead and let you, if you need to get up, go do whatever you need to do for about 5 minutes. I'm going to let you have that time, okay? Because we need to practice what we preach here. So let's give you about 5 minutes to do so and then come on back. All right, thanks. And just so you know, I use my timers too. Using it for the presentation, I'm using it for the break. It can be really helpful. Also, if you feel like you just haven't really been able to get any movement today, you know, moving around a little bit, at least stretching can be great. If you feel like that would feel good to you. All right. I'm going to give you that time to sort of do your thing for a little bit, and so you'll be refreshed when you come back. And if you're watching this on video later, you can always speed ahead a little bit if you don't want to take your break, which I think is a good thing. Holly, are there any questions that we might want to talk about now, or we could talk about it later?
No questions yet. I did have just a comment of someone joining us, but if anyone has any questions or comments, or we need to clarify anything, please don't hesitate to put that in the chat. Or if you do have a Q&A, a question, put it in the Q&A. Either one is fine. I do love that you're practicing what you preach. I think this is hard, and sometimes we think it is hard to take a break, and I think sometimes 5 minutes, something like this probably feels like a long time, but I also want to recognize that in the whole scheme of things, 5 minutes is such a short window, and if we can just take that 5 minutes.
Absolutely.
especially when things get stressful, having that just to take a break and a little time out and a moment to calm down and to calm ourselves is a great idea. I was practicing my belly breaths, just like you told me.
Very good. I love it. I love it.
For our families at home, sometimes getting your kids to lie on their back and really can accentuate their belly breath, so they can really watch their tummy rise and then go down. Yes. And that's a great way to practice as well.
It really is. All right, so it's been around 5 minutes. We're not going to go the full. We're going to do about 4, just because I want to keep the good stuff coming. Keep it coming. But that's an example of how hard it is to give yourself the full break. But hopefully you've got things arranged and you're ready for new information. All right, so let's talk about visual supports. So we talked a little bit about this before. So visual supports are a visual cheat sheet that helps children remember newly learned coping skills, replacement behaviors, routines, and it also really helps with knowing what to expect. So children love predictability, right? Things being predictable means it's safe, and that goes a long way for kids. So the great thing about visuals is they really enable that predictability by having it right there. This is what the routine is. Now I know. It's kind of like, when you're learning something new at work, right? And you're like, okay, I need to write this down. Or I need the employee handbook. I need something to guide me, right? So children can remember routines and skills more readily if it is predictable. In other words, if they're like, you know what, every time this happens, we're going to be doing this. I know that this is the case. If it's predictable, then they're going to learn it. They're going to learn it faster. And being predictable and consistent, although it can seem like something small, it's actually, wow, quite the achievement. Visuals are easier for children's brains to focus on than words when they're stressed. I know we said it before, but gosh, we're going to say it again because it's a very common thing, and I've done it too, where, there aren't visuals provided and we're just talking at kids, and those visuals are going to help them so much more when they're really stressed, right? A good cheat sheet. All right, now we talked a little bit about this. Visual supports the timer. Wow, I love my timer, and I will tell you, for kids who are typically developing, or kids who have disabilities, for graduate students, for adults, timers really help just keep track of time. And it's the personal favorite of mine is something called a time timer on your phone. And why do we use these things? Well, a couple different reasons. One is children have a poor sense of time, and it helps children to know when something is over. And honestly, it really helps with preventing arguments, because it is not me that is saying that it's time to clean up and go to bed. It is that timer over there. We're good. The timer is the problem. So using it as an object to really help structure an activity can really help a kid too. And just like, if it's something that's really fun that they don't want to stop, okay, we got 5 more minutes, that we're going to have to do this. Or if it's something that, we're going to have to sit down and do our homework, but don't worry, we're only going to do it for this long. And so we're going to know as the time goes by. So it just really structures and organizes an activity. And like I said, it's great because then you don't have to be the bad guy. If I'm working with a student with autism, I kind of won't go in without a timer. if they're working on a behavior. So here's a very simple one. And this is for the younger kids. I would say this is like preschool, kindergarten, first grade oriented. But but it can also work with older grades. It's just typically, you know, at that cognition range. So what it is it's a first then card. And I remember the first time someone showed me this, and I was like, it was actually an autism specialist. And I was like, what? No, this is going to do nothing. But it actually provides structure, organization, increases compliance, and decreases anxiety. So, and you know, with this kid, that autism specialist sure showed me, because it did wonders for him, did wonders. And I've seen it do wonders for a lot of kids since then. In terms of visual schedules, wow, this is another one of those things that just prevents so many arguments. It helps students to initiate tasks more quickly and effectively. It provides a visual reminder and cue of what to do and what is coming. And so again, it's the schedule that says it's time to do that. It's not me, it's the schedule. So it reduces confusion and anxiety. So students with social emotional challenges feel really reassured by routine, like all kids, but I think for kids who have, you know, who are working a lot with executive functioning challenges, social emotional challenges, it's extremely upsetting, you know, when a routine changes. So, so it can be a great anxiety reducer. And so we're going to talk a little bit about the 5-point scale. We'll talk a little bit more about it in the future, but this is a great visual. Again, right now we're talking a lot about what's typically for younger kids, but don't worry, we're going to get to the teenagers and the teenagers and the tweens too, your adolescents, right? So the 5-point scale is something that, again, is deceptively simple. But it helps students to organize and recognize when they're getting upset before they lose control. So, and it also helps children identify coping skills that they can use as they're getting more and more upset. I'm going to use myself as for an example of this. So if I'm starting to feel like, oh my gosh, I have so much work to do, I'm not going to get this all done, you know, I'm doing those negative thoughts, right? I'm starting to get a little anxiety. Then what I'll do, like on a number 2, you can see this picture, there's a number 2, stage 2. That's when there's just a little bit of worries. You know, I'll make a to-do list and that'll bring me right back down. Okay, I got this, you know. But a to-do list is not going to do it if I'm at a level 5. If I'm completely overwhelmed, you know, I will have to take a quick little walk around and come back to something, because that's where I'm at. So as you can tell, as there's different stages of escalation, there's different coping skills that you can use. And that's true for adults, it's true for kids. So really helping them understand what it looks like at different levels. And so, yeah, and when kids are upset, this is a great visual because it prevents that fuzzy brain, right? So when your mind's not really thinking that well, it helps you kind of guide you through it. We're also going to talk a little bit about a visual token reinforcement system. I know us psychologists love our reinforcement systems, but just try to hear me out a little bit. So the great thing about it is it's designed to make your child do what you want to get what they want. And what parent doesn't want this? Reinforcement is what is valuable to your child. It should not be something valuable to you. I remember, I've been doing this for a long time, and I had a kiddo who really didn't like going to speech. And the speech pathologist was like, no, this is rewarding. This is the reinforcement. This is the reward. I'm like, not to him. It's rewarding to you, but not to him, right? So examples of different visual reinforcement systems can include sticker charts, stars on calendars. And it's basically all leading to something that the child wants or wants to get out of, okay? So again, you're using what they want to get them to do what you want. That's also super positive. I mean, it's a great way of kind of building that skill, right? Like a paycheck. So the difference between reinforcement and bribery, it's normal to go, oh, I have a lot of people who are like, oh, I'm not so sure. So when we think about it, would you work if you didn't get paid? Maybe not. Would you consider that payment, your paycheck, a bribe? Nope, it's just payment, right? That's the real world. And so one of the main jobs that kids need to learn is to be successful and independent is how to manage their own emotions and behaviors. I think during COVID, this really showed us like what happens when there's unpredictable events that occur. And there is actually a lot of different experts are saying right now that for kids, this is one of the best things to prepare them for the work world, really managing their own emotions and behavior. So if you're reinforcing something like doing a coping skill or like a replacement behavior, that can be so great, right? So also keep in mind with reinforcement, you're going to fade it out. It's not going to be there forever. So typically how school psychs do it, and you can do it how you feel best. After 4 or 6 weeks of behavior, where we see a behavior change, we start to gradually fade it out. So maybe there was something that we used to do with a kid if they're younger, like every morning and every afternoon. Well, then they're doing great. They're doing great. Now we're going to just go to every morning. And it's best to have a big reinforcement, but also small ones along the way. A lot of things that I'll see kind of different teachers or different individuals struggle with is they're like, well, they want to earn this big thing, which is great until you've been working towards it a long time. And then you just, you drop the ball, right? As a kid, they've been working, oh, now they did it again. Well, then that big thing, now they're so upset. So if you can reinforce them along the way, it can be really great. So kind of little steps. You can have something big, but little steps and little reinforcements along the way can be very helpful. Before I leave this, I want to say one of the best things for kids is attention. Because remember, your kids always want you, right? They always want your attention. Most moms are like, especially when they're younger, right? So doing a game that they love or an activity that they love with them, often that is all the reinforcement they need. So kind of building that in with a reinforcement schedule, if you're wanting to modify a behavior or get your kid to do a particular behavior more for their own good, well, often with my kids that I work with, what they want to do is play a game with me. Like that's the big reinforcement, And so, and it doesn't have to be that long. I can set a timer. We're going to play a game for 10 minutes. They love it. They're willing to work so hard just for that, right? Because the kids that I work with, they know I love them. So like they want to be around someone who loves them like most of us do. So I think really, you can use little tricks or little like treats and little, snacks are a good thing, or maybe you want little toys or something. But I just, be aware that for little kids, often what they want is you. The other thing that often little kids and big kids especially love is doing something fun that they like with a peer, right? So they love it if they get to go do something cool with a peer, like, so you can use that too in terms of if you're trying to modify, like it's a week. If a kid goes a whole week without doing something that they're doing a lot previously, then awesome. Like, let's go get together with your friend. Let's go, let's do something fun. So that's some different things you can use too. I am not one of those people who thinks like, oh, it's only reinforcement, right? That's the only thing that kids need. That's not realistic, right? Consequences are necessary too. And consequences are most effective if they're predictable and consistent. And what I mean by that is you know that my kids will often know ahead of time, because we'll talk about it before they do the behavior. They'll know ahead of time, if I do this, this is going to be the consequence, right? So they're making that decision in the moment. So having that be consistent and having it be known between you and the kid, like if this happens, this will be the consequence. And predictable, gosh, I keep hitting up on that because my goodness, remember those new neural pathways, it's super important. So having that child know clearly ahead of time the specific behavior that will result in a specific consequence. So also keep in mind that removing a reinforcement opportunity, something that the kid really wants to do with you, will be very disappointing in itself. I had a kid that was kind of considered tough or whatever by the other kids, and he was just devastated that he did not earn the special lunch break with me and another peer of his that he could select. And then we would go and shoot baskets, which I'm not very good at, but I play along. But yeah, so it's that enough. When he didn't earn that reinforcement opportunity, he was just so sad because it means they're looking forward to it, right? So if you have a reinforcement and a consequence schedule kind of going together, sometimes just not having that reinforcement opportunity is enough in this situation. And then I will say consequences work better and faster if consequences are given for behaviors we don't want and reinforcement is given for behaviors we do want. And that is just what all the science tells us. So, there's tons of research showing that. And remember the value of visuals in that process. We talked about repetition, right? That's using the same tools. Another benefit of like those visual supports is with repetition, repeatedly teaching a skill, we're going to kind of change the channel from reinforcement and consequences. But when we're repeatedly teaching a skill with the same tools, so I'm using the same visual, this is also increasing independence. So it is not just helping you when you're really stressed out. It also will help your kid be more independent, so they don't need you to always tell them to do something, right? Like they're using that visual to help them. And so you're learning from a tool instead of the adult. At the beginning, yeah, there's lots of adult support with that, but you can fade it out and then they can use that tool for independence. And having those visuals, same expectations for the same activity for all the parents, grandparents, guardians at home is really important, because if everyone's using the same consequences and the reinforcers, it can be extremely helpful. So for visual supports, what is the most effective way to use them? We talked about that attention, right? Attention from peers or adults with a preferred activity. Wow, that really does it for most kids. And that is what I've seen them kind of work the hardest from. They do have to decide which kid is reinforcing for them, right? And at school, they have to decide what adult is reinforcing for them. And if you're, especially for the younger kids, like I said, you are what is reinforcing of them. So having that attention combined with a preferred activity. Now, technology is also something that is extremely reinforcing for a lot of our kids. So it can be a very motivating reinforcer. Also the consequence of not allowing that technology, if there's more problem behaviors and we're not growing in our skill set there, that can be very, very helpful for modifying behaviors. And sometimes I have some kids who, like they're fine if other kids are around, but they don't really care, Some of my kids with disabilities, like, like their main thing is technology. You can be there, you can be gone, but really what they want is that particular activity, game, what have you, SpongeBob, what have you, whatever it is, for that particular kid. So if someone's less social, technology usually does a trick. And even for the really social kids, technology is a great thing to throw in there. So here's another thing of caution. I would veer away from explaining the why of different routines if your child is doing it following a misbehavior, right? Because again, that attention. It's great to do it when we're teaching it. Do the why when you're teaching it. Help them know why you're learning this, because that's the time where you can give all that attention and to help establish that behavior. But yeah, if they're doing, if like, for example, a kid like misbehave, hit his brother, and looks like we definitely need to, I would have my script, let's take a break. So they would go over there, and then, but this is not the time for them to be getting, if this is at school, all this Miss Monique attention, right? Explaining why I'm doing this, because since I love kids, they usually love me. So they know, like, they usually love me. So all my attention, they're gobbling that up. So if you're using reinforcement, be aware that sometimes the behavior increases before it decreases. I hate to tell you that, but there's something called an extinction burst, and you might as well hear it from me first. A lot of times kids are doing problem behaviors because it works for them, right? Like, just like how we do some problem behaviors because it works for us, right? So if you're going to do a replacement behavior and you're going to try to reduce that behavior, sometimes you'll do an, or especially if you use reinforcement, where in order to get what they want, they have to do what you want. Sometimes you'll get what school psychologists call an extinction burst. In other words, the behavior will go up sometimes before it goes down. What that looks like really depends on the kid. The typical range is 2 weeks. You might see it like it go up, down, and kind of go a little bit higher than you would, and even before for a little bit, but it evens out. So my kids, they just get it super quick. They're like, got it. This is what I want. This is what I'm going to do. I have my visual supports. I'm doing this. So it really depends on the kid, but don't feel frustrated or devastated, and don't give up if like it goes up during the first couple of weeks. So that's part of it. It means it's working, as frustrating as that is. Okay. So older kids need visuals too, right? So as Holly mentioned, I've worked with preschool through high school, and high schoolers definitely benefit from it too. So to-do lists are something that high schoolers often really benefit from. Sometimes color-coded binders or folders can help to lessen the stress of organization and remembering different assignments of different classes. So that's different ways that you can organize, that helps to organize information. Highlighters and Post-it notes can reduce the content of the information, make it less overwhelming. So one of the things I really encourage kids to learn to do, and I used to do a lot with kids when I used to teach, was helping them to put Post-it notes. There's these gray or highlight information if they're trying to get the main idea. Okay, so there's a lot that would go into that, but basically being able to identify what are the main points here can really help now and in the future. And if you're using a textbook, what I used to do is a lot of those little Post-it strips, or those little arrow things. You just put it right there. So like, and you can go back to it. It helps just to remember the main points. Also a visual of replacement behaviors or coping thoughts. Just like for the little kids, a visual is a thing. It is, especially with the coping thoughts. What are some different thoughts that I can do, that I can have that will help calm me down? And I actually see this a lot with adults as well. There's actually a principal here in the district who has breathe written right here, so in tattoo. So you will actually see these where adults will integrate it into their environment in little ways. So, and I kind of, you see it a lot with women, but you also see it with the men sometimes. So visual of that replacement behavior can be really helpful. And then remember how we talked about with the 5-point scale for those little kids, that having those coping skills for as you get progressively more upset, knowing what those coping skills are at each level for teens or adults can be very, very helpful. Just kind of identifying it at the moment. Because remember, when you're in the moment for human beings, right, you're not thinking as clearly. Your memory is going to be more impaired. It's not your fault. It's the stress hormone from your amygdala. So really being able to think, okay, what are kind of my coping thoughts and also my coping behaviors, right? So now we're going to apply it to your life. So I guess I would want to know, just ask yourself, or you could share in chat or whatever you would like, what visuals do you use for organization, remembering information, preventing you from feeling overwhelmed, or for reinforcement? I know for me on the calendar, I'm going to the Caribbean pretty soon. I definitely have that on my calendar because that's my reinforcement. I'm looking forward to it. So what visuals does your child use for organization, remembering information, preventing him or her from feeling overwhelmed, or reinforcement? Is that something that you've used in the past with your kiddo? And if that's not, is that something that if you don't have those visuals yet, what visuals do you think might be helpful for your kiddo? So that's just something to think about. So if you're watching this on video later after this presentation, you can definitely put a pause on it and really get into the exercise. For those that are attending live, please feel free to be jotting down, thinking about this. You could put it in the chat. You could just write it down for yourself for thinking about what these different questions, because really, this is how, when we apply it to our lives, that's really how we benefit from this type of information, right? Like psychologists have a lot to say, of course, and yeah, we study all the research, the brain, all that stuff, but it's really the application that's in the magic. And the first step of that is thinking about how or if or what that looks like, okay?
Monique, I'm going to just, one of the things that did come in the chat and both in the Q&A was our audience really does like the visuals that you have shared, including the 5-point scale, the token reinforcement system, and also the schedules, the pictorial schedule. Maybe you and I can work together on figuring out a way to link that. I did link one of them, the bedtime, morning and bedtime schedules, in the chat. But if we can link that, I think that would be helpful. I know that they could probably find them, but the easier we can make it, the faster Absolutely. They can get started.
And boy, did you come to the right person, because I have a lot, as you may assume. I have a ton. So yes, I have lots of different examples, and I am very, very happy to share that. And you can go through and see what works for you. And yeah, there's also some really great websites that I'll probably be referring you guys to for as well. I'm going to give them to you. I'm going to go, if something else comes up, like you can find more, right? Like there's all sorts of goodies out there, and they're free. So
great. And I did say that you are so generous always with your resources and links and things like that. So we'll get to that. And then if you missed it at all, you can always email me. I'll put my email again in the chat, and then you can email, and then I will also pass on anything that Monique sends to me.
Yeah.
All right. I'll let you get back to it, but I wanted to bring that up because I have had that a couple times.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I can definitely forward that information on. And also, if you are watching this in the future, this video, if you put a question, because this will be like on a YouTube link or under Clover Park, if you put a question like, oh, Monique, I really need some of this. Could you please? I will check it. I will find it. I will do it. So this is not like, I'm going to definitely help everybody who's here. But if you happen to come across this video in the future and you're like, oh my gosh, I wish it would have been there. Don't worry. I got you covered. You're good.
All right. We can attach those links as well. So great. Perfect.
All right, cool. Okay, let's talk a little bit about coping thoughts. So the goal with coping thoughts, and there's a lot of misunderstanding about coping thoughts. So let's get in the weeds a bit. So the goal of coping thoughts is to decrease unhelpful thoughts and increase helping thoughts. So often people are not aware of their thoughts and feelings. I know it sounds funny, but sometimes, there's just these automatic things that even as adults, that will flash through our head. It's just something that sometimes we're not even aware that we're doing. And I'm going to give you a kid and an adult thing that I've seen people do. And sometimes they'll verbalize it, the kids and the adults. I'm so stupid, if they make a mistake, right? That's an automatic thought, real quick. And so sometimes you're not even aware of like these unhelpful thoughts that you might be having or a child might be having unless you really talk about it. So learning first for children and adolescents to recognize their individual self-talk and how it makes them feel is kind of the first step. Okay. So really spending the time, it is a conversation. And I will tell you, I've had kindergartners who, with talking, have been able to share with me. Okay. So it's something that applies to all ages, really. Preschoolers, they have a hard time. Once they hit kindergarten, yep, that's there. Unhelpful thoughts are ones that make the child adolescent feel more scared. So if you have a thought that's making you scared, that's probably not a helpful thought. Helpful thoughts are realistic, they're rational, and they're balanced thinking, okay? So helpful thoughts help people to tolerate fear. They don't make it go away. So in general, helpful thoughts challenge how risky something feels to a child or adolescent and emphasize the child's ability to cope. All right. So when we're working with thoughts and we're working on coping thoughts, we're really trying to work on replacing pessimistic thoughts, pessimistic, unrealistic thoughts with realistic thoughts that encourage coping behaviors. I'm going to give you some examples because it's a little bit confusing unless you really break it down. And like I said, tons of people get this confused. So let's take an example. Experience an exam in a difficult subject for an individual. And this is going to be someone who's an adolescent, teen, adult, who's going to college. So if there's a difficult subject for an individual, a coping thought, and they're like, oh, here comes this exam. Oh my gosh. A coping thought would be, if I study for the exam on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, I should be able to get a good grade on the exam by Thursday. So I took advanced statistics in graduate school, and that is a coping thought, because if I wanted to be able to pass, because that advanced statistics was hard for me. If I wanted to be able to pass, I'd have to have a plan, right? It's a coping behavior of studying Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday so I could do well by Thursday. A pessimistic thought would be, I will never pass this exam. It is hopeless. Like, it's all pointless. It's all for naught. And a denial thought, and these are a little tricky. I will just wing it and I'll get a good grade, right? So you get rid of the you get rid of the worry. You're like, I'm just going to wing it. I got this. Or another one would be, I envision success, so I will be successful. Now, envisioning success is very important, but if it's something that is objectively a challenge for you, like advanced statistics and me, if I just envision success and I don't do the coping skill, I'm not gonna get the grade I want, right? So that's the balance. It's trickier than you think. And you're welcome to ask me any questions. I will say one more thing about the denial thoughts. One of the things that I frequently see people using this is saying, I want to feel this way. So, this is positive. So I want to feel this way. So I'm going to say to myself, I feel this. Well, doing that because I think this is what I should. If you're worried about, if you have a little bit of anxiety about social situations and going to a party, and the worst thing, it will cause you more anxiety if you're like, I feel great about going to this party. Like, don't lie to yourself. It's okay to recognize that you have anxiety and think of the coping behavior or the coping thought. Well, my three good friends are there. I can talk with them, just like those sort of things, right? So you're acknowledging, oh, this is my feeling. And then this is the coping behavior to help me with it. So here are some more general coping thoughts. I have been in this situation before and I will get out of it by doing this. I've used that a few times when I've been in some sticky situations. I can get help if I get stuck, essentially. So a big thing is knowing who are your helpers, right? And for kids, who can I go to? At home, I can get help from mom if I get stuck. At school, who are the people who, like, if you get stuck and you really need help, who are those people you can go to? And this is if you get stuck emotionally or if you get stuck like in the problem solving, right? And for yourself, who are the people you can go to if you get stuck? I know I've had some late night calls with some of my best friends if I'm like getting emotionally stuck or if I'm trying to figure out a situation, I need their help. Another one is, as long as I put the work in, I will likely succeed, right? So I'm doing that coping behavior. As long as I put that work in, I'm likely going to be all right. Another coping thought is sometimes friends disagree, and that's all right. Right? We don't always have to, and this is a big thing for kids, adolescents, we don't always have to agree, right? It's okay. We can still be friends. That's a big thing for a lot of adults too. If I get too overwhelmed, I can. For kids, adolescents, teens, adults to know what that is. And if I exercise, my body will feel less stressed. For a lot of people, exercise is where it's at. And so helping them to write down a realistic thoughts or helpful coping statements on an index card or piece of paper can be great for kids or teenagers, or adolescents, they can just kind of pull it out subtly without all the other kids saying. And it's helpful for when they're feeling stressed out. You can laminate it and just keep it in the wall, keep it wherever, in the purse. Also, a common thing that cognitive behavioral therapists will recommend is if you have a little thing of jewelry. In a way, wedding rings are like that. I'm always reminded of how much my husband loves me. And so these are just little reminders. I also have a bracelet from my sister that she gave me that reminds me of how much she loves me. I have earrings from my grandma and that make me feel very, I don't know, if I have something scary happening, I put them on because my grandma was like a hardcore businesswoman. It just makes me feel loved and like, I can do this. So back to that 5-point scale, using that for replacement thoughts and behaviors. Here are some kid examples I've seen. We're drawing to a close. This has been a long presentation, so we're drawing to a close soon, but we're going to go over this last little bit. One of them that one of my, this little angel boy articulated is, my sister is younger, so she needs more help, but my mom loves me just as much. And we had to kind of talk through it to get there, but that's what he wanted to remind himself, because he was feeling like, because, with the baby, she just took a lot of mom's attention. If I share my toys with kids, kids will share their toys with me. I know it seems like something they'll just know. Sometimes with little kids, man, you've got to spell it out. Sometimes my mom does not like it when I yell or hit, but my mom always loves me. That's a big thing. You know, my kids will often want affirmation, but I still think they're wonderful. And of course I do. And I will let them know, oh, I think you're great. I don't like it when you do that, but I always like you, you know. One of my little kids, he was like, we talked about it and he was like, why is everyone, I hate it when people are looking at me. And I'm like, yeah, you know, but the thing is, when they're looking at you, you're yelling. So when somebody yells and makes a loud noise, do you look at it? So if you want them to stop looking at you when you're upset, stopping yelling will help. And it wasn't like sarcastic or anything. It was just really processing it through with him. And then another one, that sweet little girl said, if I feel sad, going on my swing will make me feel better. So those are some different examples. And so we're going to do the last apply it to your life here. So think of a situation that really stresses you out until you're at the point where you're almost going to lose it. Everybody's is different, whatever that is for you. What is a pessimistic thought you sometimes have that makes you feel more angry, upset, anxious? And what is a coping thought for that situation? And so also I might ask yourself, have you ever heard of a child state a pessimistic thought? One that I remember saying when I was little, and I've heard so many little kids say it at least once: nobody likes me. You know, another one is, I'm stupid, etc. There's so many like little phrases that are common amongst kids. And, you know, with my nobody likes me, well, the reality is I had a lot of friends. I just was upset about something, you know? So like, that's a little kid, right? Pessimistic thought. But there, you know, there's a lot more coping thought was, well, let's see, I'm getting together with these two friends of mine, you know, having a play date this weekend. Like there's, you know, there's evidence of coping thoughts, like, you know, it's okay. And like an example of a coping thought for a little kid who might say something like that would be like, oh, you know, yeah, so-and-so was mad at you, but she's been mad at you before and you guys have made up, so they'll be okay, right? So those are some different apply it to your life thoughts. And there's also an extra credit one if you want to do a progressive 5-pointer for the different levels of escalating upset or anxiety or anger. Apply what you will. And then the coping thoughts and the coping behaviors, as well as, you know, you can really make that quite complex in terms of recognizing what's in your body as you're getting, like, what's your feelings? You know, do you have tense shoulders? Are you breathing deeply? Or are you breathing shallow when you're anxious? You can really break it down into physiological in terms of your pessimistic thoughts, and then do the coping behaviors. There's a lot of different ways you can do that. And it's super helpful. So, and actually, even with little kids, I'll have them like, what are the kind of thoughts you're having? What are the kind of, you know, what is your body doing at these different levels of being upset, so that they can sort of learn to recognize it and use those coping thoughts and behaviors before they get to that 5, right? Before they are just like, I can't do it anymore. So this is a great thing to kind of break down and helpful for kids and adults. But it just looks a little bit different for adults, but it's still 5 different stages, the essential basics, right? So there we go. We have concluded the presentation. Thank you so much for listening to me talk for a very long time. I do love this subject, and you know, I'm so blessed to have a profession that I just adore. And so I'm so pleased to be able to share these things, because, you know, it's helped so many kids I've worked with, and also kids in my family. And so I'm so happy that you can, that you have this available too. And I really hope that it works well for you too.
Well, Monique, thank you so much for your passion is very evident when you're talking. And so I am so very thankful that you could join us for tonight. Unfortunately, our kids don't come with a little thermometer on them that you can read like, ooh, they're at a 5 or they're at a 4.
Right.
So as moms and dads and parents and caregivers, learning what those levels are as kids get younger, but then actually all of us learning how we can give voice to those feelings. So maybe say, I'm feeling kind of at a 4 right now. So I don't know if now's the best time to have this conversation. But even having those discussions and being able to let others know how you're feeling certainly goes a long way.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I've done it myself. I'm like,
All
I'm
right.
at a 4. I need to just sit down for a little, let's just take a moment to breathe.
That's right.
So
it
can be very helpful. Another thing, if you, with your younger kids, or especially with your teenagers who kind of hide their emotions a little bit more, at the different levels, writing down, having them identify what you can do to help them at different stages, or if at a certain stage, all they need is quiet, so really identifying what are the things that those around you who love you can do at the different stages to help. And sometimes, if a kiddo's if we're getting way up here and we're having a behavior that we really don't want, I let them know, this is when Miss Monique is going to do this. This is when that consequence is going to happen.
Yeah. Well, you gave us some really wonderful things to work on and work with. Monique will share some of those resources, those free resources that she had. I've put my name in the chat. If you didn't get it in the chat, if you are watching this as a recorded event, Bocchi, HBOCCHI at cloverpark.k12.wa.us. Just email me and then I will attach those links and resources then for you. Again, both thank you to Beatrice for being our interpreter tonight, Monique for your wonderful presentation, and special thanks to our audience for being here in July and taking this time to learn really healthy ways to better parent and to better be a family. So again, I hope you have a wonderful summer. We'll see you back here when school starts, if you're not already in summer school. And this presentation will be put on our Clover Park School District YouTube. So thanks again, Monique. And thank you all.
Everyone.
Good night.